All right, well then, I think the first way to start out this video is for my viewers to kind of get an idea of who you are and what your channel in this case would be about and what your goals are as a coach. I think that's the best way to call you as well, because I think I saw somewhere that you do that as well.
Yeah,
So, could you tell us a little bit about, well, your name, I guess, for us first, so people know who you are, and then
that's a
what you're
great
specifically
start.
doing?
Yeah, my name is Abby Ruston. That is the label that I've been given on this earth so far. But yeah, so what I do is I record videos, a lot of times talking about Neville Goddard, talking about Joe Dispenza, metaphysics, spirituality, psychology, in hopes to help people who currently feel helpless or stuck in their life right now to reframe and see the power that they have, and how they, when you can kind of go back and see why it is you believe what you believe and reason on that, it can dramatically change your life, and you can start having that power to create the life that you want rather than kind of what you're left over with from the past.
Yeah, yeah. That's basically the core, well, issue I guess we face in life is that either if we're not really aware of what we're capable of doing, we stay stuck in a certain, pattern of the mind or belief system.
Yeah.
So it is very crucial, I guess, indeed, that people should kind of analyze them at times to see if they're actually holding them back. So
Yeah, the whole metacognition is like the make and break, it seems, of people's lives, creating what they want versus feeling stuck and not getting what they want.
exactly, I think that's always a noble, well, goal to have, to try and help humanity to at least consider this point of view if they haven't.
Yeah.
But that also kind of leads me into the question that I always find interesting to ask of anybody is, how did you actually end up on this path? Like where you ended up with studying Neville yourself and any of the
Yeah.
other teachers you also talk about. I saw Joe Dispenza, I think, if I pronounce it
Mm.
right.
Yeah, that was perfect.
As
I
a
mean, from
other
what I,
first.
yeah, I mean, that's a great question too. I think sometimes we don't know even know how we get somewhere until we look back a bit. Because it's like, I mean, really desperation, me feeling stuck, me feeling powerless. A lot of the research and studying I started doing was because I was not in good places, and I was having, in that cyclical, kind of chaos and terror in my body of like, oh my gosh, there has to be more. I don't want to live like this. Like, I feel inside that I have, there's something more. There's something more beautiful. There's something more peaceful. Yet when I look out and I experience my world, it's not the same. Like, what's going on? And I did my first time to ever really get into, um, maybe the idea of your thoughts, how powerful they are, and how using visualization was really powerful, is actually kind of a first iteration in life. I was a professional athlete. So I did athletics, probably where you're from, in Europe, track and field in the United States. And I threw shot put and I made it to a world class level. Got to go to a world championship. And I was given a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz back in, I don't even know, maybe 2006. And that was really kind of the first time I saw, like, oh, and looking back, I started creating the athlete I needed to be to do the goals that I wanted, and then starting to use visualization, living in those experiences and events, which I later found out from Dr. Joe Dispenza, that I was essentially creating new neurological pathways. So my brain and my body thought I had already done it, even though I hadn't experienced it, and it became more and more natural. So then I could do it in athletics, but the topics that really or categories in my life that really had the most previous pain and trauma was personal relationships. So I kept finding it, money and personal relationships. And money is tied very much into emotional stuff from relationships growing up early on. So I still was having I couldn't seem to do it in this other way. I could be successful here, but yet when I applied it here, why was that the thing? And it really took more and more and more. And I think that the journey to healing and the journey to self-discovery and awareness, I always see pictures of a kind of a spiral up, but I really feel it's a spiral inward. We kind of get more and more themes, and the more we're willing to really look at who we're being and the beliefs that we really have, the more we get to see that, oh, we are participating in some level, that is an echo of something inside. And it just became a fascination of mine. And then I dug more and more and more. And I get really excited when I learn something. And like, if I have a new snack I eat, I like want to tell all my friends, or if I go and I find like, oh my God, did you know? So that like the more and more I learned, I was like, okay, it was a very awkward start for me of like, I really feel like I want to share this with other people, but what will people think? What if I suck? What if no one watches? Right. So I really just had to deal with like, okay, well, I can't know unless I try. And I started tapping into more of like, okay, well, no one thought I could be a world-class athlete, but I knew I could. So I used that old model of there was nothing on the outside to show me that I could do it, but I knew I could do it. There was a knowing. So I trusted myself. And I think also too, when you do that in life, that really creates miracles and can really do leapfrog or quantum leaps in growth, because that's the ultimate thing. Whatever you believe inside about yourself, you'll start seeing little glimmers and, kind of miracles, or what in the world, like serendipitous things happen. So that's kind of a rough how I got to be where I am. And then just kind of growing, and then more I interact with people, it's like a new version of like, wow, there's all these people, like people are watching. Oh, wow, I'm helping. Okay, what else do people need? And the more I ask that, the more it's turning into a whole new realm. So, yeah.
Well, it's actually a beautiful story. It has a lot of elements, but it's
Yeah.
like, it turns into something more and more beautiful. I think also we either, I think I heard this sometimes in Buddhism, it's like you either grow through suffering, or you are perhaps one of those people who, for whatever reason, life has always been good and great and like literally positive, but you somehow spiritually, inwardly feel like there's got to be something more to all of this. And I
Yeah.
think we all go through that in our own ways, as you said as well. So when you talk about being an athlete and stuff, it's kind of interesting, because the last person I interviewed also was an athlete. They talked about them finding more and more about this power of consciousness through the sports that they were involved in. And I think that's very common if we really analyze a lot of stuff in life. If we really look at our lives, we find activities that somehow have shown us that there's way more possible for us than we might superficially realize about ourselves. Because if I look back at my own life, for example, real briefly, is that the way I got onto this road of studying metaphysical teachings and the mind and all this stuff about consciousness was mostly because I used to be more of a dreamer, as I would describe myself, someone that liked to create things, just be artistic, make music, be really creative in my mind. And then for me, the question slowly arose within myself, and that was like, could I use my imagination to actually improve my life itself? Like, instead of just doing something like making music only, could I actually use the same faculty of my mind to improve it somehow, everything around me? And of course, we discovered that that is possible. But I think that's what I like about Neville. Neville's work in particular is that he would really stress that word imagination to really get you to think about what that power, that faculty can actually do for us in our lifetime. It's just beautiful how it always works in different goals, whether we realize it or not. It always seems to come back to that ability of opening our mind to possibilities that others might not see, but we can sense it right within
Yeah.
ourselves.
And the other thing too, I think is important, because, even in the creative realm, like because I grew up as an athlete more so in the first, like I said, iteration, I think in my head, I had given the story of like, oh, well, if you're athletic, you're not creative. And I did have some kind of negative experiences, like with teacher telling me literally I wasn't creative, which is like, that's why I'm like, okay, people, you got to go. If somebody told you that, you got to go with your adult mind back to that situation, because the younger version of you didn't have the tools and didn't have the understanding. But if you literally go back and see the situation as it was and give yourself a new meaning from that, you literally can now take back the power of like, oh, that woman was going through a really difficult time. It was never a value of me, but going through that and like not identifying as creative, which again, I believe we're all creative. But in terms of power of imagination, if somebody's watching right now where they're like, oh, I wish I had that ability, or, like I'm not very imaginative, or I don't really use my imagination. And everyone's always using their imagination. Have you ever thought, like, if you're in traffic and you start running late and you're like, oh my God, what if I get late, they're late, and then my boss is going to be really mad, and then I'm going to get fired, and then and this whole catastrophic, like scroll of events happens. And it's like, obviously you don't want that, and that's releasing all kinds of chemicals in your body and stress responses. However, that's your imagination, right? You're creating things that haven't yet existed. So people realizing, oh, you already are using that energy every day to a certain amount. Why not use it towards, like you said, creating your whole life, not just this one element, or not just like trying to keep yourself safe of like, oh, what if this really bad thing happened? What if this really bad thing happened? Realize that, oh, that's just my mind and myself trying to keep me safe. I'm trying to keep me in the known, because I know if I'm in the known, I'm alive. And a lot, your whole wiring is for survival. So if you're realizing, oh, that's what like the auto thing is, but I can still be alive and have my dream and live in it. I'd still, like, a lot of humans around the world are doing that. So the power of the imagination is always at work. The only question is it helping you towards where you want to go, or is it keeping you in where you don't want to be anymore?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because the way you actually put that reminded me of a video I once made back in 2019, and I actually said it like that, sort of similar myself. Is that it's not so much about whether you're creative; it's more like we're using our creativity to create the problems that we now complain about, something like that. That's
Yeah,
something
that's
that
good.
always stuck with me as well, to realize like it's my own mind, it's my imagination. I'm just running away in a direction that makes no sense actually, because it's not really improving anything for me, whether internally or physically speaking. Because indeed, if the mind is completely haunted by visions of everything going wrong and what could go wrong, yeah, there's no salvation there, literally,
I
only
love the way you said that.
disappointment.
Yeah, and then that's a whole other thing too, right? In like culturals and that idea of salvation, and the idea, I was stuck in an idea that, oh, okay, when somebody comes and saves me, then I'll be valuable enough, or, and always waiting. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about that as being a, Newtonian model. When the outside thing shows me something different about me, then I'll value myself. Then I'll start being creative. Then I'll start constructing my life towards the thing, like, oh, if somebody gives me that shot, then it'll prove to me that I can. But we don't, it doesn't work like that. We have to be the one, we have to have that inner salvation, to be like, no, I vote for me. I am going to give me the space in the world. I am going to give me that momentum. Start finding and looking for things that are going to support that. I actually just recorded a video before this, and the idea, this is also too, I think it goes a bit off of that idea of the always using your imagination, because Bruce Lipton says we take in, and I don't think it's just him, but it was his video that I watched, that something between 30 to 50 million bits of information a second our subconscious mind is taking in. And so it's like, well, that's a lot of information, so what is relevant? Well, we're going to filter out all that other stuff that's there in our realm that we can see. But the 40 bits of that are going to perpetuate your stress state, that are going to perpetuate you not being good enough, they're going to continue, make you feel that you're rejected, and that everyone's going to abandon you. You don't get what you want. There's never enough money, right? We'll literally go through all that information to find the things that confirm confirmation bias. Yes, see, this is it. And only until you start saying, okay, what if there's something more? What if I am not able to perceive out there? There's opportunities that already exist. I don't have to create them. I don't have to spend every ounce of energy every day to, make money. That idea of like, you're not making any money, you're just kind of opening up your capacity to receive money. To me, that was such a like, whoa. And it doesn't even have to be about money. It can be about love, right? You're not making the love up in somebody. Like, you're just broadening your ability to receive it, but also to perceive of it. And so that whole thing too of like just opening up and realizing, oh, the reason these certain things aren't coming to me is because I'm actually not able to perceive of them. And why am I not able to perceive of them? Because I don't believe it's true about me. Well, why do I believe it's true about me? And like the etymology of belief is so wild, because it literally is what you accept to be true. It's not some like crazy thing where it's like so confirmed. It's simply an acceptance for something to be true. And I always
Yeah.
think about like an email subscription, right? Like sometimes you subscribe for an email and then you're like, why did I do that? And you're like, unsubscribe. And it's the same exact thing, in my opinion, about beliefs. You're like, you know what? That helped keep me alive and get me to where I am. And thank you so much. Have gratitude for it. And now subscribe to something that's going to upgrade you to that version and that level. but it's always happening. That's the thing too. It doesn't just start, manifestation too doesn't just start. It's always reflecting back to us who we are to ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. I think a process of what they describe as self-inquiry is very useful in this process as well. Is to ask yourself questions about why do I believe this to be this way? To really analyze where are these thoughts coming from? What kind of, well, perception do I have about myself and what I'm capable of doing? And the more you actually question it, the more you also realize there is no clear-cut answer, that there's a
Mm-hmm.
limit to it. So you actually expand your mind in greater and greater awareness as you look at yourself. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think most people are perhaps a little afraid of doing that, or to be confronted with their own perhaps bad beliefs, or the
Mm-hmm.
realization, oh yeah, I am screwing this up because of certain elements, and to have acceptance of that and responsibility for it. It might be one of the elements I've seen so far that people might struggle with, generally speaking. I'm not saying everyone. Most people that actually study this, they already are capable of doing it, but there's like a broader range of people out there who might find that very intimidating. But yet we would still like to say to everyone out there that there's a lot more possible,
Mm-hmm.
and they're capable of a lot more greater things than they might realize,
Yeah.
in order to improve the whole world at large eventually. That's kind of the ideal vision for humanity, of course, but I guess we got to start individually with our very selves. And
Yeah.
yet that's ultimately also the most important place to actually work with, because you only have yourself.
Mm.
The rest is just there temporary.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it can help shift your beliefs dramatically if you come to see that first and foremost, and then to accept it and not to fight it either, so that
Yeah.
you kind of go with the flow of the good and bad times, but still perceive the greater, well, awareness and abilities that lie dormant within all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually, yeah, I mean, it's beautiful that you help people with that, because it's one of the most important areas, of course, of improving our lives. If the belief systems don't match up, then we might stay stuck forever.
Yeah. And I think it was Jung that said, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it was kind of like, until you recognize your own pattern that you're not aware of currently because you're not looking for it, you'll keep finding different things and call it like fate or destiny. I can't remember what word he used. And that is true. Like we all have this pattern based on our childhood, based on a lot of different things. It can even be through genetics, right? Like epigenetic wise. So unless we're looking like, okay, the people and the faces change, but this pattern or theme keep reemerging. And if you're not really like paying attention and going towards those ghosts, which like Alan Watts said, if you have a ghost, you go to it and start seeing, what is this? Because they're not permanent. They're only permanent. They're permanent when you don't address them. So to go into them and to look at your pattern is when you actually can have free will. And you don't have free will as long as you are blind to the patterns that you're reacting off of. And that's why you feel stuck. And that's why it feels no matter what you do with your conscious brain, which is, 5, maybe 10% of your ability, and that huge subconscious just has this program based on the past and is going to perpetuate that into the future. You do have power over it. However, it does take a bit of a skill that no one teaches, like growing up through, you learn about math and you learn to read, which is important, but no one ever teaches about our inner world. So
Mm-hmm.
it does take more effort in some ways to find the people who resonate, their messages resonate, and also learning how to follow your own intuition. Because I feel like when we all follow those kind of little, those wonders, or they're like, what's over there? You do find the little nuggets of, whatever you need to get to the next thing, and everyone has their own internal compass to guide them to where they ultimately need to go. But until you start following that, you'll just continue to live based on the past, and like, he said, fate or destiny or whatever, because it feels that way, because it's like, oh man, it's just meant to be because this is just happening. But it's like, it's actually, you're just looking for the things, and you're trying to reproduce these experiences based on your childhood dynamic. So
Yeah, yeah, there's usually a lot more than we might at first realize. And that actually kind of leads me into one of the questions I had for this video that I thought would be interesting to ask you, and that deals with, from your personal, well, experience and what you've maybe seen with people you've coached, or in general with your own subscribers, what is the biggest stumbling block you think in this current day and age for people to effectively work with this kind of information? Because to kind of add to that, something a friend of mine told me in private a couple of days ago was that they were kind of realizing this world is full of distractions, and the more society expands with technology, etc., the more stuff hits your senses all the time. And I said to them, that kind of seems true. It seems like a blessing and a curse. And I think that also kind of deals into why it might be difficult for people to really work with this information throughout their own journey, especially if they're currently not surrounded physically with people that, work on the same kind of stuff mentally and study it and understand it most of all.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is the biggest stumbling block for people to, pay attention to? If they like an element, like have you noticed something like where you're like, I think this is one of those things that people should keep in mind while they're perhaps working on, studying Neville Goddard's material. How can I improve my life? I really want to improve it,
Yeah.
etc.
I mean, I think that the big thing is realizing there's not one magic pill. You're not going to watch one video and everything that ever is going on inside of you will all align and then you're good. It's just a series and evolution. It's layering, right? They say like an onion, right? You get this clue to unlock a door. It's kind of what are they, those little dolls that's like the doll within the doll within the doll within the doll. It's like a kid's thing. Or I think it's a kid's thing. Anyway, it's a thing. And that's kind of how it works too, right? Where I think people a lot of times are looking outside of themselves for this magical cure, this one potent thing. And by default, they go and they try to do everything, but they're not listening to themselves. And to kind of ask like, well, what if I do know more about what's best for me than I think I do? And following that, right? And distractions, yeah, I think that can work. Like you said, it's a blessing and a curse. And I think anything's about a belief, right? Where it's like, are there too many distractions out there for me to get what I need? Or is somebody, it has to do with their intentions. If they're looking for somebody outside of themselves to save them, then they're always going to be they're always going to reflect back to themselves a victim, waiting, because that's what they're sending out. But when they start taking responsibility, which you said earlier, of like, okay, I have created these beliefs. That means I can dissolve these beliefs and create new ones. And they're the only ones to do that. They're the only ones who did it in the first place. And realize it's not about anybody else. Is really is how I believe is we can only. Debbie Ford wrote a book. I forget, maybe in the early 90s or something. It's called the Dark Side of Light Chasers. And one of the biggest takeaways in that book that I got was, if you ever see somebody like a writer or like a really good speaker or a teacher, you're like, wow, this person is so good. Like I admire them so much. That's because it's in you. The only reason you can see it is because it's in you too. The same thing happens if you're like, oh my God, this person's such a jerk, or like this person bothers me so much. It's the disowned things of ourselves that we're rejected and said we're bad and we're putting on other people, right? Projection. So I think that when you can start looking out and realizing all of these things are so beautiful, this person's saying, it's in you too, and taking more ownership of your healing and more power for being your own teacher, and realize that inner teacher is going to find guides outside of you to reflect something that you need to remember, and less about starting from nothing and not having anything. I think if more people had that stance, and I mean, I did not have that when I first got into things. I thankfully have a mentor / soul coach who is very patient and really helped, and repetition for me is huge. So same thing over and over and over and over. And I'm like, oh, it takes me a long time to sometimes get something, but when I do, it's really in there. But I don't know, for those of you who know what doshas are, I'm an earth one, so it can be very slow moving. But yeah, that's what I would say is just if people could take more responsibility, take more power in their healing process and their discovery process, I think that they can really do more with it, because they're like, oh yeah, I own this. Like, this is me. This is a reflection of me to me, and not like this person outside of me knows more than me and that sort of thing, because that's an inferior.
Yeah. I really like how you put all of that pretty elaborated. But with the main point that I hear in that is indeed it kind of reminded me of this risk that people have, is that if they do start to kind of take these kinds of teaching serious, where they're like, I want to investigate this, they might get caught up in the pursuit of just trying to seek the next
Mm,
fix sort of idea, where this next video might make me feel great, or this next teacher or book or this or
yeah.
that is gonna help me feel good. And then people still kind of miss the point of also looking inwardly to really ask themselves the question again, yeah, right? What is this person actually saying? Or what are they suggesting I should do? And to what extent am I actually living up to that? If I feel that this is going to be useful, right? Am I then also making an effort to live up to that instead of just listening to it and then going back to my old habitual way of living? I think
Mm,
that's one of those stumbling blocks I see actually all the time. When, especially if you look online, it's pretty easy to just look up forums, just closely look at what questions people ask about all of this, and then you realize, well, it's like the answers are usually staring us in the face all along, but we don't really perceive them as yet
yeah,
until
that's a
we
great.
start to really pay attention and become calm enough within ourselves to actually receive that intuitive guidance.
Yeah, and in applying, right? You have like all
Yeah,
these things. It's like, okay, how can I apply it? And that's a great point too, is like collecting all these things for a quick fix, if you will. But like if you start like, okay, I have this, you don't need as many. I just think of like a little like nugget of cheese and like a mouse, like, right? You could like you want to like consume it, you want to like get into it, you want to apply it, you want to see how does it work, does it not? Do you need a little more clarity? You don't want to go and gather a basement full and then it just sits there because there's no purpose. But yeah, it's a great point of how you said that. That's really good.
exactly. And have you seen like a sort of theme throughout your channel of people that study, in particular, Neville's work? Do they have like a specific theme you feel like they're all trying to seek through it? Like, maybe that doesn't sound entirely logical, but it's like that's something I'm trying to figure out. So that's, I'm kind of curious if you've noticed a pattern where people are specifically looking for this or that through, for example, his kind of insight. So I've noticed, for example, there's a lot of videos out there about people wanting to find their soulmate, or at least there's someone, that would be perfect for them. But then it's also sort of tied into Neville Goddard's teachings.
Mhm.
So have you noticed a sort of element that you feel like people could really use more insights on, or it's like a goal? This is what they're trying to achieve with this information.
Yeah, like kind of misusing the laws in a way. Is that what you're saying? Like they're trying to use the law, but the way they're doing it is kind of not. That's what I'm taking the question.
Yeah,
Um,
that's possible. It's a subject I haven't really discussed a lot because I always feel it's a bit, sensitive to really focus it on a specific area. But it's
yeah,
still very interesting to hear, like from your own viewers, if you've noticed
yeah.
like certain
Yeah.
patterns.
I think sometimes the law of assumption, people, again, good intentions, right? Everyone at the end of the day is trying to keep themselves safe, get their needs met. So
Hmm.
sometimes people are trying the best they can with what they have, where if they don't have tools and they've never been shown and they don't really have all the things, then they can make huge jumps and not understand. And then it gets kind of really out of whack, right? It's like a wheel that's not balanced. It starts really wobbling. So what I've noticed is like specifically for law of assumption, right? So an assumption is what you give consent and permission to be true. This is most likely at an unconscious level. So until you start investigating what your current assumptions are, why they are there, only then can you really replace them because you're dissolving. I believe in like more of an alchemical process, which is basically, there's a transmutation of something, right? Like it burns through, it burns away all the stuff that no longer serves it, and then you come out with a different thing, right? The pureness of it, I should say. So some people just want to say, oh, okay, now I assume. Now I assume I'm loved. Now I assume I'm valuable. Well, it's like, I wish I had a better example. It's, oh gosh, sometimes I can think of something. It's like saying, like, if I have these keys, I'm like, okay, I don't have these keys. Well, it's just a veil on top of an assumption. Like, this is real. This is in there. This is
Hmm.
ruling your life right now. And you have this kind of sheet of like, no, I don't assume that anymore. I assume that they're gone. Well, those are just really empty words. So you've got to be willing and vulnerable and brave enough to look, okay, what is my assumption now? How are you going to replace something if you don't know what you're replacing? You don't even know where it goes. It's like, okay, I'm going to go on a trip, and you don't know the GPS location of where you're going. You could be taking a right and a left and a straight. Like, you don't, is that towards your goal? Is that away from it? So until you are brave enough to really like look and say, okay, what are my assumptions? Okay, oh, okay, that's why I'm doing, okay, and kind of more understand the mechanism, then you can replace that. If you're just like making up things in your head, again, conscious brain, unconscious, or conscious mind, unconscious mind. You can talk with your conscious mind all you want, or say affirmations too. I believe that's like kind of a way too. An affirmation just fortifies, it's trying to strengthen something, but you can't use it to purely replace the other thing. So, or like it's like clipping a weed. Well, the root is still there. And you're like, no, I took care of it. And it's like, well, give it a couple of weeks and that root's just going to do the same thing it's been doing. If you really want to remove something, you got to get it from the root. So that would be one thing, is with the best of intentions to try to keep themselves safe and get their needs met, they're more topically trying to use it rather than really getting it from that underground.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that I've noticed as well with my own videos. Whenever I did post a lot of material concerning Neville Goddard, for example, over the months or years by now, sometimes get comments of people that are in a very desperate spot. And I always feel kind of, well, saying sorry sounds kind of, well, really strong, like almost like I look down on them, like pity them almost. But it's more like, it's I think one of the risks of, well, this whole digital age as well, is that people might get more caught up in the watching only of something, instead of also going within themselves to find understanding of the very thing that they're listening to. That's kind of what I was getting at in a way, is that perhaps people also get kind of in that spiral where they're stuck in one, well, angle of the whole process of manifestation. Ultimately, it's like you hear the message, but then you have to sort of turn that message into integrated with your own behavior.
Yeah, and I mean, it is like if you're looking at a mirror and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get an eraser, I'm gonna get a magic marker, and I'm gonna change the color of my shirt. It's like, obviously the only way, if I was gonna change the color of the shirt, is to change my shirt, and I have to do it, not the reflection. And a lot of people try to change their life but based on the reflection and with their attention and focus on the reflection rather than, I mean, that's just the cause. The effect is you, and people don't realize that they have that huge power of being the effect that's causing their reflection. So and it does take, it's not fun sometimes to look at that, right? It sometimes can be filled with a lot of pain and uncomfortable things. And, I'm not asking people to go into the worst possible thing that ever happened in your life. Sometimes it's painful, there's tears, sometimes no. Sometimes you just have a different perspective shift. You're like, oh, okay. And you can take off, right? And go on and build from that. But as long as you're looking outside of you and you're trying to change the things that are reflecting back to you, and you miss the point that you're the cause or you're the effect to that cause, then I think I'm saying that backward, cause and effect. So you're the cause causing that effect, right? You're the original object, and the reflection is just you. When people start realizing that, that's when they start really they relieve that anxiety, because it is like you're waiting for somebody to come, somebody to help. And a lot of times in childhood, it's a similar theme. They felt very powerless. They wanted something from outside of them and they weren't getting it. So when they can start seeing that as an adult, it really shifts their life.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, what you say about the mirror is also kind of reminds me of a quote from Neville, where he would say that, well, I don't remember it exactly anymore, but it came down to there's no point in trying to work on the reflection. Instead, you should change the concept you hold of yourself. Yeah. Which is, to me, it instantly is like, okay, I understand. It's about going inside within my own being itself to figure out what's going on there. Yeah. And, sometimes people, I think, overlook that one part, or that one element of daring to go inside. But this video hopefully reminds some people to keep doing it, especially in this current times with the stuff going on in the world. People get so frustrated. I hear it in private all the time, and I'm like, that's one way of going through this time, but it can also be a great way to just keep your inner peace and find that bliss and peace within yourself that will help you to go through all of it with grace, with yeah, with strength, with actual inner strength and stability. It's
Yeah.
kind of important.
Yeah.
So I hope they will get that from it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's hard though, because in the cultural, like different cultures, it's like all about the outside, right? So it does take a second to be like, wait a second, like you're saying, like, oh, inner peace. Oh, I get to say that I'm not bothered by this to an intensity that's going to rattle my inner world. Because every time you say the thing outside of you, and Dr. Joe talks about this, every time you allow your outside world to be greater than your inner world, and it's telling you how you feel, your personal reality is dictating your personality, how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So only when your personality is greater than your outside world, your personal reality, can you really start creating the world you want. And that's by being vigilant, which the etymology of vigilance is being awake. So being awake to what you're thinking, how you're reacting, what do you want to respond to, but you're going to take a brief moment and make a new choice. Those new choices will lead to different experiences and different emotions, which will completely change your life.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's also at the core of Neville's teachings in this case is that when he talked about this imagination, what I always got from it after going over it for years, over and over and over again, to really think deeply about what is that he wrote for himself to share with
Mm,
the world, was that I also came to the conclusion, yeah, I could let the physical world control my imagination, or I could use my imagination to control my world. And
mm,
when you really start seeing that, that's kind of when the beauty of your own uniqueness can come out, can start to sort of bloom.
yeah,
And it's so important for people to actually realize that instead of being lost in the physical world where everything can be chaotic as hell. It's like no
yeah,
joke, it can be a mess. And then if
totally.
you're so caught up in it, it's hard to really accept and hear that there's this power in you, this consciousness, your human mind, that you can use these things to actually improve all of that. At first, it sounds overwhelming and almost impossible, but a closer look at our individual lives will reveal there are many elements over there where we already have actually used our minds to do all kinds of stuff that on reflection we only realize it. So perhaps some self-reflection is also very useful when studying this material or your videos, etc. Everybody that watches even my videos is that they should have that going for them to
Yeah,
really get at the core of it all for themselves.
yeah, totally.
But yeah, I like another point here that deals with a person, for example, maybe you've coached them or had emails about it or have seen it, but people who have been trying for perhaps for months or even years to get these teachings that they hear about, all this wonderful stuff to work for them, and they still don't get any concrete results. What would your advice be for them? Because then it's kind of like people can either become very discouraged and think this is not working, this is all nonsense, this doesn't work. So then they might get discouraged in all kinds of negative places for themselves.
And yeah, I mean that's the thing too. Like it can be disappointing, it can be frustrating. However, I think, and it's hard to just go off general, but it's like, specifically like say somebody is trying to manifest like an amount of money or like say like $10,000 a month, just like very objective, and they're not doing it, and they're not doing it. I think it's important for them to ask, okay, well, what does it mean about you that you haven't done it? What does it mean about you if you did do it? Because it's not about the outside thing, it's about like who they are being. So you can keep chasing the thing and waiting for your outside world to tell you you're valuable. But I mean, like, even though it sounds really simple, that is what I keep finding more and more and more. Like, it's a mechanism. Are you doing these things and looking outside and being like, oh, it's still not here? Because you never left your old state of being. You're still
Mm-hmm.
feeling that lack. So, you know, that's like the way that the universe works, right? It's like if I drop a book, I'm on a second story right now. If I drop a book and I put it out the window and I drop it, well, we know it's going to go down. It's not just going to float, right? So it's a law, right? The law of gravity. So the same thing, manifestation is going to reveal what you believe about yourself, right? The self concept, like those are all very synonymous with each other. So if you keep trying to do something over and over and you're not getting the result or the experience that you're wanting, you have to go back and look at who does you believe yourself. Do you think that you are worthy of receiving that? If I want $10,000 a month, but my self-worth says that I'm only worth $1,000 a month, I can't actually receive this. The universe is like, here you go. I'm like, no, I'm a thousand. When I get this in my hand, then I'll open up. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, actually have to have the concept that I'm a $10,000 a month person, or whatever, business or business person, and then it just goes right there because you're open to receiving it, because the reflection of you is just going to be met with it. So it's really easy to understand with the mind. However, looking at how it's expressing in you can be more deeper. Like, look back in your childhood. What were you told about money, or what were you told about relationships? There is something that's in there, and potentially in a blind spot. I'd suggest in that situation to go and seek somebody, like either friends or maybe a coach, or a somatic therapist, to help work through that. Maybe it's stuck in your body of a belief, like there's a lot of different things that it can look for a person. However, it's going to go back to, you could also think that it's not safe for you to maneuver like that in the world. That's a huge one too, where people are like, oh, I'm working, I really feel I want this. But 7-year-old you was like, remember, when we opened ourselves and we were vulnerable in relationships, we got hurt really bad. Don't do that. And so adult you is like, look at this person, they're so great. And then you just close down, and you close down, or you sabotage the relationship, or you find people who aren't emotionally available because you're actually not emotionally available because you're scared. And that's okay. But dealing with those fears of what you see yourself to be safe, how you view as what safety is another big thing. Not only what you want, but expanding the way in which you're safe, that it actually includes the goal that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's something that it's something I do all the time with everything I want to achieve. I would like to achieve all these dreams and goals as they come and go. I always have to analyze for myself, whether I'm in harmony with such a goal, whether I'm actually in the same frequency. Because when I say that, I mean is when I'm really in sync with my goal, then ideas keep coming into my consciousness on what I could and should probably do in order to progress towards it. So it's this intuitive knowing that starts to sort of happen, that makes it so that you don't really have to be stuck any longer. So perhaps many people overlook that part, where they're kind of going about as how in school the school system is teaching us to memorize something only, usually, and then we think we know. But with this sort of material, we actually want to really implement it as a part of our lives, and perhaps that's what people are overlooking at times. So otherwise you're just studying it and you're like, it doesn't work. I can repeat this from the top of my head, for example, but why doesn't it work? And it's like, maybe something in you still isn't really in harmony yet. If you start recognizing that.
The brain and the body connection, right? Where it's like, we have to think. So you're thinking the thoughts, you're saying the affirmations, you're visualizing girl, but you also have to start creating its life in your body, meaning the feelings of what it's going to feel like, so that you're, like you said, in harmony, literally on your state of being. And that's like, how you think and how you feel is how you're going to move, like the radio dial on, like, okay, I'm living in fear and worry. Oh no, I'm living in joy. I'm living in happiness. That's how you move that David Hawkins chart of consciousness. That's how I visualize it. What are you thinking and feeling? And on one side of that chart is your brain waves. So the lower your brain waves are, the less stressed you are, right? You're more in harmony, you're in peace with what you want. It actually moves up in the level of consciousness, and higher levels of love and joy. But the more chaotic and stressful you are, the higher frequency of the brain, and then the lower consciousness levels, fear, worry, that sort of thing. So making sure what is happening in your body, what is happening in your mind, are they on the same page? Are they on the same frequency, on the same feeling, like on that same, I guess page is the best one, but that's a good thing to think about.
Thought and feeling making them one. It's kind of like the conscious and subconscious mind working in harmony with each other on a given goal that we set, which is indeed one of the most important parts. Well, we could keep probably talking about all kinds of angles on this whole subject. That's how it usually goes when it comes down to metaphysical teaching. So, at the end of all of this, what I kind of wanted to ask you is, I don't know if this is perhaps a strange question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is that Neville would regularly mention that God is the human imagination. Now, I always interpreted that as showcasing the concept that all things are possible to God, as scriptures would say, but just so all things are possible to imagination if we learn to direct it consciously. Because if you don't really have that experience yet, where you can either go into a lucid dream or really deeply into your own imagination to experience it as an objective reality, then it might be hard to comprehend that all things are possible to you because of your imagination. But what is your idea about Neville's statement of God being the human imagination? Have you ever had any thoughts about that where you were like, I don't know if you actually have. Yeah, I'm just assuming you know that he talked about it, that
Yeah,
subject a lot, right?
yeah, I
Has that
do.
ever had any
I
effect?
Yeah, I'm still, my background is coming from a strongly Christian, like traditional Christian approach. So one of the things that really led me to Neville was the fact he was like kind of reinterpreting, and like to me, I could understand things deeper. Like they felt more true the way he would interpret the Bible, right? Where it's like, okay, that, but like, how is it applying to me, right? So I am still sorting through, and actually, it's in the other room, but I just got a book. It's one hardback cover book, but it has 10 of his books, and as well like a 1946 lesson um, thing in there. So I'm really excited to like really get into all the different ones. I've read a couple of his books. But yeah, in terms of God as the imagination, uh, my understanding of it right now is that, that spark inside of you, that like, oh, it's like the seed where all of this is coming from. Like that power of it is like your ability to kind of live in your full potential. So it's like, he says, you are God. I'm still searching for what feels true for me, but it's like, they say, we're made out of stars. It's like us getting back to our cosmic power is like, it's in there. It's like when you start using that, that is like the ultimate like potential comes from that. And that can only be from God, right? The creator of everything. So we have like the essence of creation in our imagination, however we want to go with it, since it comes from like, the cosmos itself. So I don't know if that really answered the question because it's still like forming in my own, self. But I really like what you said there about all things are possible with God, and the fact that God says it's the imagination. It's like in my head, I can see just that like a spiral of color and endless possibility. Really, right? They say that a forest's potential is in the seed of one oak. The one acorn, and that's kind of the same idea I have, where it's like this whole crazy vision that you might have where people are like, that's impossible. But the potential for that crazy dream or wild dream is in the seed of that acorn, where it's like, it's just this tiny little thing. And it's like the ultimate clown car, like the Jack in the Box, where when it opens, it just explodes infinitely and like disproportionate to maybe what it looked like it could be. So, and I think all of that, like rippling effects of continually compounding, is God's energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually beautiful. I mean, there's no wrong answer to that question. It's like, oh no, it has to be specifically like this.
Oh,
But
yeah.
so, I mean, we're all on this journey to figure out this nature of existence, of what life is within us. And it all comes from, we all go through different processes and probably have different angles about it, experiences and conclusions on the matter, ultimately about what God would be to us and what that term actually means in this world that we're living in right now.
And
But
and like
it
one other thing I had off the top of my head is like, they always say too, like we are just part of the one. So potentially too, every little part of that acorn that we have and that desire to express that way is ultimately coming collectively together to form that one, that whole. So that would be another way that I would think of that too.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, it all comes down to this concept of pure awareness, pure consciousness. It's something that I've been talking a lot about through my channels of late, because it's only something shifted inside of me where it's no longer so much about my physical goals and achieving, but more about realizing my own eternal nature, as I would call it. And what I've discovered from that is also what I think Neville realized as well throughout his life, is that behind this imagination would ultimately lie what we could describe as infinite awareness and infinite consciousness. So it's like right now we use our imagination, but we're still always the spectator, just the awareness that is aware of this whole show going on.
Mm-hmm.
That thing behind it I think that's the God nature in us. And
Mhm.
when people start to realize that, man, all your suffering is just gonna melt away. It's you
Yeah.
know you are an immortal being, as he would say as well. You are immortal. You can never die.
Mhm.
At first, this all sounds so weird to humans because they only know the physical, of course. So you see
Yeah.
people die around you all the time. I mean, one of my parents passed away as well, so I know, like, okay, death. I can clearly tell it exists. So if someone says you are immortal, this all ties in beautiful to the
Mm.
understanding more of the actual nature of what you could call the soul, or at least your consciousness itself. That is
Mhm.
just part of a bigger ocean of consciousness. And basically, what you said, we're all basically a particle of that, and it's
Yeah.
part of a greater whole. And I think that's at the core of Neville's teachings. And the more we understand it, the easier it automatically also becomes to actually improve stuff if you want in your physical life, because you just know where the power lies.
Yeah.
And I hope people will find it. And since you do the coaching, I'll just mention it through my video as well. You can go to her. Maybe she can help you on your path if people need some help, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Would love to help.
All right, great. Well, these were the subjects for now. Maybe in the future we could always discuss something else about this metaphysical nature of life. Because I said I,
Totally.
I I keep it within an hour, so I think we managed to do that. Uh,
Victory.
so, is there anything else you would like to share with my viewers, the ones that actually end up watching this all the way
Like
through
they
this?
feel like they get a special reward, right? Like congratulations, you've now qualified. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this topic for one, but also to share it with those in your community. So thank you for this.
You're welcome, and thank you as well for joining in.